Carol Baskin.
Gavrilo
Killed her husband,
shot the
whacked her.
Archduke, he whacked him.
Convince me that it
Now
didn't
Austria
happen.
invades, it's happening.
Venom to tigers,
What's
they
next?
snack
It's
it.
craze. Let's get
What's
cracking.
happening? Carol Baskin.
The assassin.
Welcome again to Coffee in the Kitchen with Mr. Evans, Stone, Arizona. Let's get a little close-up of that. All right, today's topic is World War I and what were the causes of World War I. Of course, first off, we should realize they didn't call it World War I back in the day because they didn't know there was going to be a second one. So if you're reading a primary source document, it probably will refer to it as the Great War. Now, when they said the Great War, they didn't mean great as in good. They meant great as in the size of it, right? A lot of teachers use the acronym MAIN, M-A-I-N, to help you remember the supposed 4 causes of World War I. Right? So those of you who have seen this before will know that the M in Maine is supposed to stand for militarism, right? That's the sound of Mr. Evans giving you dangerous information. Because now I'm going to tell you what a load of crap all that militarism talk is, right? Ever heard of these guys?
This is Sparta!
Or how about Genghis Khan? They were pretty peaceful, those Mongols, huh? So look, throughout history, many societies, many countries have been militaristic. So where does this idea come from about militarism? Well, it's usually brought up with an accusation that it's Germany that's being very militaristic and that somehow they're responsible for causing the war because of their militaristic culture and society. Well, where does this idea come from? Well, the British, of course. In August of 1914, the British cut the Germans' transatlantic cable to America. So this is how news got to North America. And so throughout the next 3 years, nearly all of the news America would get would come from Britain or France. Of course, that little detail is left out of most of your textbooks. The truth is, many countries in this time were militaristic. And you could certainly argue that they were just as militaristic, if not more militaristic, than Germany. But obviously something had changed by 1914. So what was it? Well, I think what had changed was it's a combination really of militarism and what you should have studied in previous units, the Industrial Revolution. Right? What had changed was the ability to build these huge stacks of ammo in preparing for war. If you remember the Gettysburg clip we watched in my class about the Civil War, one of the things that ends the battle is both sides run out of ammunition. That would have been common throughout human history, is one side to run out of ammunition and therefore want to pull back from the battle. Oh, our mascot's here. Here's our mascot. Say hi, Jasmine. So the truth is, many countries were militaristic. What had changed was their ability to prepare for war thanks to the Industrial Revolution. Now, thanks to factories and machines and technology, they were spending a fortune to build up these huge stacks of what they thought would be a supply that would make them unbeatable. But of course, if everybody's spending all this money on military supplies, sooner or later, somebody probably figures they're going to have to use them. Well, one country that wasn't militaristic was Belgium. I mean, what do you do if you're a small, tiny country and no matter how much money you spend on your defense, you have no chance to win a fight? Well, what you do is you get back up. And that's the A in the acronym MAIN. The A stands for alliances, as most of you know. So some of these alliances were very public, like in the case of Belgium and Britain. The idea that Belgium was trying to not spend a lot of money on their army and to rely instead on their neighbors to protect them was their strategy. Other countries had alliances for different reasons. Sometimes they were secret alliances. Sometimes it was about warning an old enemy or a threat. But there were dozens and dozens of these alliances, some very public, some very private. Russia, Great Britain, and France, one of the biggest alliances, and Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, the other biggest alliance. So, the I stands for imperialism. You should have covered imperialism already. And this one's pretty obvious. Countries were competing for colonies all around planet Earth. They had been for 100 years or more, but the Earth is only so big. And by 1914, these imperialistic powers have claimed nearly all the territory on the planet. So at this point, there's nothing left to claim unless you want to take on another one of the big boys. And then lastly, the N stands for nationalism, which is pride in your country. And again, look, all countries have nationalism. We have flags, we have parades, we have celebrations for our independence. A little bit of nationalism is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, who would want to live in a country where everybody thinks, we suck, this is a horrible place? When nationalism is taken to the extreme, however, there is a word for that. It's called jingoism. And we can see where nationalism can sometimes be a force then to either unify a bunch of smaller territories into one large country, or where nationalism can serve to rip apart a country into smaller pieces. And in World War I, we see this in both directions. Nationalism was being fostered by Germany because Germany was a bunch of separate territories that were coming together, that were unifying, and were trying to create one German state. And they were doing it successfully. And so Germany essentially is becoming the new big player on the block. England, France, Spain, they've all been power players for a long time. But now Germany is the new kid on the block, and they're upsetting the apple cart. The other countries don't like the competition. So all of this combines to make Europe ready for a fight. In fact, there were already politicians who had referred to the southern part of Europe, the Balkans, as a powder keg ready to explode. We knew that based on these four causes, that something huge was going to happen soon, that this war was ready to happen, right? All we need is the fuse to light the powder keg, right? And that fuse happens with the assassination of the Archduke of Austria, Francis Ferdinand. But what the heck's an Archduke anyway? I mean, Austria has an emperor. Emperor dies, who usually takes over? You got it. The prince. Okay, what happens if there's no son, if there's no prince? Who takes over? Well, then the royal bloodline has to look for the nearest relative. In this case, Francis Ferdinand is the nephew to the Emperor of Austria. So he's the Archduke because he's the heir to the throne. He's the most important duke in the royal family. He is someday going to be the Emperor of Austria. So the southern part of Austria was a territory known as Bosnia. Bosnia had been annexed by Austria. As is always the case in these annexations, some people were okay with it, some people were not. There were lots of people living in Sarajevo, town in Bosnia in particular in the south, who weren't all that thrilled to be part of Austria and were hoping to break away and either form their own independent nation or join with some of the other Balkan nations. So this is nationalism in reverse. This is nationalism looking to break apart a country. People who are saying, we don't want to be part of Austria-Hungary. We don't want to be part of the big country. We want to break apart and form our own little tiny countries. So the Archduke decides to pay a visit to Sarajevo in Bosnia, and amazingly, the newspapers publish the route that his car is going to take, and a group of Bosnian radicals, terrorists, form a plot to kill him and take him out. Now, all these guys are young, they're teenagers, they're in their early 20s, they don't have a lot of money, many of them are sick with tuberculosis, they're gathering sort of on the sly, they get some weapons, but their weapons are old and not very good, but they know the exact route that the Archduke's car is going to take when he arrives in Sarajevo. And so the first assassin is waiting along the parade route, and he's got a hand grenade. But it's not like the hand grenade you would see nowadays and in modern times where you pull the pin and it has exactly 5 seconds. This is an old, kind of like what you might have seen in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons if you were a little kid watching the reruns, where you light the fuse and you're not quite sure how long this thing's going to take to go off. So the assassin's waiting. He sees the Archduke coming down the street in the car. The Archduke is in a convertible. There's a chauffeur in the front. Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife Sophie are in the back seat. The assassin hurls the grenade at the car, but it passes beyond the Archduke's car and blows up behind the car. The Archduke's fine, not a scratch on him, not a scratch on his wife. There are people in the car, there are his security in the car behind him who are injured quite critically, but the Archduke is fine and the driver speeds off. The assassin realizes that he's failed, and a group of assassins have sworn that they would kill themselves rather than let themselves get captured and interrogated by the police. So, in order to try to protect his friends, the assassin takes his cyanide pill and he jumps off the bridge, hoping that his body will hit the river and be washed miles downstream, and it'll take the cops that much longer to find his body and identify him. Only 2 problems. The cyanide he took was so old it didn't work anymore and didn't kill him. And the creek he jumped into was only about 10 inches deep. So instead of dying, he basically broke both ankles, and when the cops show up, he's over there throwing up on the side of the creek bank. Maybe not quite as scary a terrorist as we all thought. Well, some of the other terrorists either panicked and ran away and didn't even try to assassinate the Archduke, or got lost along the parade route somewhere. And so it looks like the Archduke might survive the day. And then, in a fluke of history, somehow the Archduke's car winds up stopped right in front of the last assassin. Gavrilo Princip has a pistol and whips it out and shoots the Archduke and his wife Sophie. The crowd jumps on Gavrilo and takes him out, but Gavrilo has succeeded where his friends failed, and he has assassinated the Archduke. It probably would have not led to much else, except in the course of the investigation, the Austrian authorities believe that Princip and his Black Hand assassins got their weapons by crossing the border and getting them from Serbia. And so Austria is not just mad at this individual assassin who succeeded and his small group of thug terrorists who helped him out. They're mad at the country of Serbia, and they want something done. Now, alert again, second time, more dangerous information that you probably won't get anywhere else in any other textbook. So, how did Gavrilo view himself? Well, here's a quote from Gavrilo. "There is no need to carry me to another prison. My life is already ebbing away. I suggest that you nail me to a cross and burn me alive. My flaming body will be a torch to light my people on their path to freedom." Gavrilo saw himself as a freedom fighter. He thought he was fighting for the independence of Bosnia. That's how he viewed himself. And he was not alone. In fact, little more than 100 years after the assassination of the Archduke, Sarajevo has erected a statue to Gavrilo Princip. And the president of Serbia at the time was quoted as saying, Gavrilo Princip was a hero. He was a symbol of an idea of liberation. Others can think whatever they want to. Have people who, from their point of view, from their perspective, see them as freedom fighters. Well, that's obviously not how Austria felt. After the murder of the Archduke, Austria blames Serbia for the killing. And not only do they want anybody who might have been involved to be imprisoned and arrested, they want to send in their own officials into Serbia to investigate. Now, Serbia responds with, hey, we're very sorry that your Archduke got shot, and we will do our best to help with investigations, but we're not allowing your law enforcement people to come into our country and make arrests in our territory and arrest our citizens. And Serbia basically denies Austria's request. Austria essentially issues it as an ultimatum, do this or else. Well, what's the or else? Well, we know what's coming. The or else is an invasion. And so Austria invades Serbia. Well, as bad as that is, it's still just a kind of medium-sized country attacking a little tiny country. Wars like this happen all around the planet. There's wars going on right now all around the planet. What makes this go from this medium-sized country fighting a little tiny country and just another little tiny war around the planet to the Great War, the largest war and the most deadly war the world had ever seen up to this point? Well, when Austria invades Serbia, Serbia reaches for their alliances, and they reach for backup. And Russia comes to back up Serbia, saying, look, it's not fair, Austria, you're way bigger than Serbia. We're not going to let you pick on our cousins, our little neighbors. When Russia backs up Serbia, now Germany, who has promised to back up Austria, is forced to enter the mix. France now has pledged to back up Russia, and they see this opportunity, and now France comes in. And so very quickly it goes from this little tiny war to now we've got the biggest players in Europe, most of them, France, Russia, and Germany anyway, all committed to this fight. And we'll see where it goes from there next time